Okay, well, Harold, I'm going to get started, and this is being recorded.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll circulate it around in a recorded format for people who want to listen uh, uh, later on, and I'll have to apologize for not having it in a format that was easy for people to kind of download the information and well to get on the Zoom. Um, but I think we can circulate it around pretty good. Um, and I just want to just kind of give you I guess some time to just kind of talk about yourself and to kind of let folks know your background of how long you've been living in the district there and where you went to school and just a little bit about your educational background and also based on that, what is that's really giving you a burning desire to run for the Florida House Representative District 117, and I think the voters would also like to know what's been just some memories that you may have in the various cities that are in that district. And so I'll get done talking for now anyway, and I'll let you kind of talk about those things, okay?
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Harold Ford. I'm a candidate for Florida House of Representatives, District 117. Essentially, I was born back in 1966, born in a small clinic in Perrine, Florida, known as Webb Clinic, which is a rarity now because, again, that clinic no longer exists, and most people have probably forgotten its memory. But nonetheless, being a lifetime member of this district, I went to school through Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and I matriculated through Pineville Elementary, Mays Junior High School, and Southridge Senior High School. And as a part of that whole process, it was very, very enlightening, engaging, and a lot of fun. I then left from Southridge and went to the University of Florida, where I graduated with a bachelor's degree in statistics, returned home to get a job. I worked in the tech industry for about 8 years before I transitioned over to education, where I've been for the last 22 plus years. And what I've seen and experienced even in education, it's really, really, in many cases, gut-wrenching, but more importantly, it's also a very vital institution that we definitely need to give a lot of attention to and help it become as great as it can be and should be. While during that whole process of education, I also attended Florida International University, where I received a bachelor's in arts and religious studies, a specialist degree in educational leadership, and also a master's in business administration. I'm also a holder of a master's in divinity degree, in which, again, as part of my calling into ministry, I've been able to, again, earn and also work there as well. So through my years, I've seen South Dade evolve as a community. I've seen it grow from a predominantly farm-based community to now I guess you can say, a duality of farm plus commerce-based community, which, again, with a few more injections of economic input, I think we can definitely make it a beacon and a model for other places throughout the United States that they would benefit from, and also increase the jobs, provide the type of income as well as wages that are definitely needed to help sustain a family, as well as, uplift the community. So with all of that, that's basically part of my life and my passion. But one of the areas that really hit us hard, it was a curse and a blessing in disguise, was Hurricane Andrew, because we saw the devastation that it provided, but we also saw the economic uplift that it also encouraged. And through that whole process, we were able to transition now, again, from a lot of the farm base that you see that existed back then to now a much more commerce-based, or the duality of farm and commerce-based and capitalistic model that we currently have. And we're slowly moving, again, to less and less farming and more your brick and mortar or other types of businesses that exist. And what I would like as a visionary to see is us to now become an East Coast tech economic hub so that we can bring those types of businesses, those types of jobs, and those types of salaries to our community, which will address a number of the other ills that exist. And through that opportunity or through that model, I think we have an excellent opportunity right now to make it happen. So
Okay.
as your next leader,
Okay.
as your next leader, I look forward to holding the reins and leading the charge. Thank you.
Okay. Some of the things you hit on that I'm going to talk about a little bit more in questions later to get into some more specifics. But I wanted to ask you, since you've never held elected office, and as you know, in the Florida legislature, in the House, the Democrats are minority by a large number. And as a consequence, there are no Democratic chairs of any of the committees. I would gamble to say that the Democrats are not going to pick up enough seats to actually overtake the Republicans this legislative cycle. And in the Senate, the Republican Party is also in the minority, and in the executive branch, there's only one statewide elected Democrat. So given that you've never held elected office, can you kind of give me an idea of what you think best prepare you to be the leader that's going to bring those things back home to South Miami, and also how given your skill set do you think you're going to be able to kind of deal with those realities in Tallahassee that I just mentioned?
Okay. Well, with my educational experience, business background, and community awareness, which are three very important traits, which will make me, and I feel make me the best and most well-rounded candidate to represent our community. I think also having the interpersonal skills where you know how to reach across the aisle to get things done. Now, it's one thing that we can stay in our own silos and call ourselves Democrats or Republicans, but guess what? If I'm the elected leader in District 117, I represent Democrats, Republicans, and independents, whether they voted for me or not. So my goal is to, one, become more of a unifying agent in this whole process, but also, two, making sure that we can develop the relationships for the benefit of our community, more so than the benefit of my personal gains, which again, my goal in going up there is not for personal reasons, it's for my community. Because I feel that I am the best, I'm the most capable, and I'm the most able to understand many of the ills that exist currently in our society as well as our state, but also I'm also available and ready to meet the demands that it will take to make the difference that is warranted.
Okay, thank you. And also, I want to ask you, given the legislative process, and again, you'll be coming in, being an elected official for the first time, and as you know, each year we have a 60-day legislative session, and this upcoming year is going to be very important for another reason, and that's because we'll be doing redistricting, which we do every 10 years. So kind of give me a sense of given the things that you want to do. I want to ask you kind of a two-part question, if you will. Actually, this is actually two questions. What do you think are the key issues that need to be addressed in House District 117, and also when you get to Tallahassee, what committees that you think you'll be interested in serving on that's gonna help you be impactful to address those things that you identify?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, there are a myriad of issues that we need to have addressed, and many of those issues have been here decade after decade after decade without suitable solutions being proffered. But three of the issues that I definitely want to tackle early on are affordable housing for our community, transportation, and criminal justice reform. Because time after time, these three areas continue to, persist as far as being issues that aren't being addressed. And if they're done correctly, And in some instances, we may have to think out of the box to make it happen, because even with affordable housing and transportation justice reform, what we've known as the norm of the past, or what I've often told my friends who are in law enforcement officers, you can't solve 21st century problems with 20th century solutions. And so we got to encourage them to think out of the box and then come back with plausible solutions that'll make some changes in those areas of affordable housing, transportation, and criminal justice reform. Now, as far as the committees that I would look to serve on, there are a couple of joint legislative committees that I've endeavored to serve on, and then there are some House legislative committees that I look to serve on. The two joint legislative committees are the Budget Commission and the Committee on Collective Bargaining, because again, those are very critical as to knowing where the numbers are, how the money's being dispersed, where it's going, and how we can better manage it. With collective bargaining, obviously, we're dealing with unions and industry and trade. And so we're trying to make sure, again, everything that we do is in the best interest of not just the business, but also the employees that are working within those businesses. When we talk about the legislative committees, I want to, again, look at being a part of the Appropriations Committee, the Education Committee, the Redistricting Committee, and the State Affairs Committee, which will help us try to get monies earmarked for us so that we can deal with our transportation deficiencies. So when we look at committees, right now, those are the 6 that I have my eyes on. But however, if there are others that the community feels that, hey, they need us to focus on, or they need me to focus on, I'm more than likely and more willing to listen to what the community wants, so that I can make sure I'm addressing those issues at any point in time.
Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. It's actually not on my list here, but it's something I kind of thought about because we talk about economic development, and we talk about entrepreneurship in the African American community. What do you think are some of the barriers that exist, and how can you, as a state legislator, kind of address some of those barriers that exist that are barriers to entry in certain industries or certain business opportunities for African Americans, or barriers to jobs. Just I'd be curious to find out what your thoughts are on that.
Okay, basically, in simplifying it, education is always your foundation to getting over those barriers of entry. Without the proper education and foundation, then it's going to be almost impossible to break through many of those barriers and make the impacts or go in those directions or industries that you desire to enter. Now, as it relates to the other piece, which is finance, many times that what we've seen throughout I guess you can say, the existence of our country, we've seen the federal subsidization of gentrification, which has led to, again, federal government designating certain areas within quote unquote Black communities conveniently that are deemed as empowerment zones. Well, now they're encouraging investors who don't live in that area to bring their monies into that area, and those investors are going to be looking for a return. But what ends up happening is they end up moving us out, meaning Black people or poor people in most cases, and moving themselves in or others who look like them so that they could have access to those resources and be a party to the benefits of that gentrification process. What we need to do is, again, we need to mobilize as a community, and even if, for example, one example that was shared with me, if I had 100 people who could donate $1,000, that's $100,000. We can take those dollars and use it to purchase some properties and begin the process. Now, if those individuals we had a continuous giving, and again, obviously there's some particulars that would need to be worked out, but if we did it on a larger scale, there's a lot we can do to not just clean up the community, but purchase those in-lots that exist. Find ways to work with the county to see if they would give us matching funds, or the state to give matching funds. So again, the more resources that we have that are financial, the more we can do to change our own community and solve our own problems. When we look for others to solve our problems, they may not solve them in the manner that we deem is best. So I think it's best, since we know what the problems are, we understand the problems best, we need to now look to mobilize so that we can solve our own problems and not rely on external factors to come in, because if it's not solved the way we want it, we're going to be right back at the complaint board again, trying to get whatever solution that they didn't provide it.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you something else, and you made me think about it when you was talking about gentrification and things. As a legislator, you're going to go to Tallahassee, and you're going to be part of a legislative delegation that's going to have to take to Tallahassee those issues that your local government is concerned about sometimes. And those issues are as to how the development is operated, and the zoning and all those things. In a lot of cases, those end up being local decisions. They've been made by by local government, and so there's going to be kind of like that relationship that you're going to have with local government. And because what local government does is that it gets pretty upset when the legislature tries to tell it what to do. So you go to Tallahassee and you say, well, I'm going to tell local government I want it to change the way that it's doing things, so that we don't have those issues, that you're concerned about. And it's really a kind of a complicated thing politically, to have to deal with. But it could you could be successful at it. But just tell me, how would you approach those little difficult political issues when you're trying to move the community forward, and local government is kind of on a different page,
Well, the key is going to be communication. Bottom line for me is I've always been the type of person who basically, if there's an issue that's currently exists, what I would do is approach local government, inform them of the issue, and ask them how can I best support them in addressing this issue. Because without, again, their input, I don't want to provide them with something that they may not deem as a viable solution, as we just discussed before. So it's important for me to get an idea of not just what the problem is, which in most cases, the problem may have come to my office instead of going to local government first. So what I would do is I would then, approach local government to say, hey, listen, this was brought to my office. I want to know how I would be best able to help you solve this matter so that it won't become a major issue moving forward. And, we can always, one, get the problem solved, and then two, make sure that it is addressed in a manner that is equitable and possible, so that the people get what they want, the community gets what it needs, and then at the end of the day, everybody's happy with the solution.
Okay. And I want to ask you, kind of change a little bit. In that district, about a third of the residents are under the age of 20. And given that, there's two things where I'm sure in another question, you're going to probably get to job training and voc training, things like that. But before they get to the age of 20, they're also in school. They're in K through 12. What is your position on public schools versus charter schools? What are your views on that? Because that's an ongoing issue in the state of Florida. And as you probably know, in Jefferson County in North Florida, they've done something pretty unique. It might be the only county in the country, that's completely taken over by a charter school company. So just, what's your feelings on charter versus public schools?
Well, first and foremost, I am a product of public schools, and that's where my heart is. Although I am school choice, I am not in favor of the disproportionate allocations for charter schools that our current and previous legislators have put forth. I'm disconcerted by the lack of services that charter schools provide to special needs students, the discriminatory practices that exist, and the lack of accountability and double standards afforded to them by the legislatures, by the legislature. So in other words, any school, in my opinion, that receives public funding should be held by the same standards as public schools. So although I won't say charter schools don't have a place, I think they may, but will I support charter schools? I can't, because of the simple fact that they're not held by the same standard as the public schools. So until that happens, and that goes with any school, if you receive public dollars, whether it be vouchers, whether it be the scholarships, whatever the case may be, if you're receiving any dollars from public schools, I'm sorry, public dollars, then you should be held to the public school standard, period.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. Now, on the issue of criminal justice reform, as you know, we're dealing with a lot of issues, regarding racism, implicit bias in the courtrooms. We have unfair hiring practices. There's a lot of issues that minorities, are dealing with. And a big thing that we're debating here in Tallahassee, a lot of people are talking about things like bail reform. Because of this issue of someone being released from jail because they happen to be wealthy, regardless of whether or not they're a danger to society. So it's based on wealth as to who gets released and gets to go home.
Right.
So there's a myriad of criminal justice related things that we're working on in the legislature. And I just want to just kind of get some idea from you. What would be your approach to criminal justice reform, and also just the biases that we see in the system?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I am all about dealing with the issue of sentencing disparities. When I see an issue of two different offenders, one being black, one being white, commit the same crime, saw by the same judge, one offender gets 2 years, and we're talking about the crime of rape, and the other one gets 20 plus years. Something is wrong there. That's a major problem when one judge can deem one person salvageable and the other person an animal. And until we get that implicit bias out of the courtroom, that's where, again, that's where it starts. Then we have to look at the bail program. The bail program benefits who? Private industry. That's their entryway into getting support for the private prison complex or the industrial prison complex. So again, we got to look at the bail bonds program, because again, if this individual can't afford an attorney and has to be appointed one, then that should tell you automatically they can't afford bail in most cases. If they can't afford bail, they're going to sit. How do you allow someone to sit in a cell without being charged, all because they can't afford to go home and see their family? Now, that doesn't excuse whatever offense that may have occurred, but what I will say is until that person has been charged, or again, as the Constitution says, they have a right to a speedy trial, then we need to address that issue. And you can't allow the the prosecutor's office to continue to put forth delays in the event that they don't want to deal with the case. So part of our issue here in Miami-Dade County is, one, we need a new state attorney. And that's why what part of my effort is right now, as I'm campaigning to gain the seat and become the representative for this community, I'm also advocating that we need to change the state attorney's office. And I'm advocating for the opponent of our current state attorney so that she can come in and bring forth reforms that are currently in existence, that currently don't exist, I'm sorry. But again, going back to bail bond reform, let's look at sentencing disparities. And then last but not least, I think part of what would change this whole idea is what happens if we give now those inmates who are working for these private enterprises, pay them minimum wage, pay them $15 an hour. Will private industry still come in, or will it now shake the system so that now the system has to think about, okay, will I now pay this person $15 an hour, which now a percentage can stay with the inmate, a percentage can go back to his family to help care for any family members that he or she may have. And then the third could go into a trust fund so that if there are any quote unquote fees, court fees, or any other fees that that individual may have upon their release, they have the funds in place to cover those fees, and now they can become a voter in the state of Florida. So I think the overhaul needs to be done, and it's very comprehensive, but realistically speaking, we have to fight against the powers that be so that we can make sure we put those systems in place and make it a reality.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm going to ask you a little kind of a controversial question. As you know, the past couple of months, this nation has been galvanized by the death of Mr. Floyd.
Yes.
And police organizations and policemen have been under a lot of scrutiny
Hmm.
as a result of that. And just a lot of systems have been under scrutiny, and most would say it's about time as a result of that. Now, the political realities are, that these organizations do have, quite a bit of clout in Tallahassee and in our local governments and et cetera. And there's some policies that are in place to give certain protections like qualified immunity. I'm kind of wondering, and you mentioned the state attorney's office. Um, have you thought of any ideas about how to address some of those things? Frankly, that's been around for a long time. I mean, and I think you may have an interest. You obviously have an interest in criminal justice reform,
Hmm.
but I think that's a big
Yes.
part of it. You know.
Well, again, it's first of all, if you're looking at reforming criminal justice, it's got to be done in phases. We can't expect everything to be done, I guess you could say on the drop of a dime. But what I would start with when I'm looking at law enforcement, because I have a number of friends and family members who are law enforcement officers. And again, I'm concerned about their safety when they go out in the community and you're stopping a car where you don't know who or what that person or how that person may respond. But I think also we need to look at the fact that just last week in Chicago, the deputy fire chief, I'm sorry, police chief, committed suicide.
Mm.
So there's some mental health issues that we're ignoring. Now, what I will say on without equivocation is mental health and racist and racism are two totally different things. So if you're a racist before you became a police officer, you're going to be a racist with a badge. But what I will say is, if you have individuals who are, again, having some mental decline because of the stresses of this particular profession, we need to now reach out and say, wait a minute, why aren't they having psychological examinations annually to assess where they are? So if there is a decline, we can move that person to a different position, because when you send that officer who is on a mental decline into the community, you're no longer protecting and serving, you're endangering the very community that he or she was sworn to protect and serve. So that's one of my concerns, is we need to now step back, let's make sure they get annual physical examinations. Two, I have a number of friends, again, who like to work out. They may use, quote unquote, a form of steroid. Well, we know steroids make you aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know if part of this is also roid rage.
Mm-hmm.
So now, do we say they need to be drug tested, annually or randomly, so that we can address these issues and make sure, again, we're protecting the community? The goal is to protect the community, but also protect that officer. Now, that's just two things I would say. Let's start with internally. When we look at the external factors, law officers have now what they call objective reasonableness, which means basically if they feel threatened, they could use whatever force they deem is necessary.
Mm.
And I don't even like the term objective, because objective means it must be concrete, it must be factual. It seems like more subjective reasonableness than objective. Because if subjective, it's how I feel about it. Objective depends directly on facts. So if we get the facts of what transpired in that encounter with a law enforcement officer, and he or she, again, overstepped their boundaries, we now have to know that we have a state attorney who will protect the community as well, and make sure that officer is not allowed to go back onto the streets.
Okay.
Now, the other piece is liability. Should they be liable? Now, one of the things that I posed to several friends of mine who I've talked to and interviewed, again, that are law enforcement, I said, well, what if law enforcement officers had to obtain their own liability insurance? If they had to obtain their own liability insurance, trust me, the insurance company is going to do their due diligence in making sure that their risk is low on a payout for any officer. Mm-hmm. So now, again, there are certain systems, if we tap them, we can change the system. Because one thing that happens is now if that officer can't find insurance, he or she can't go out on the streets, patrol, or do anything of that nature, which again would endanger the community. And the last piece that I want to add to this, unless we got to go on to the next question.
No,
But the last piece,
okay. Go ahead.
yeah, the last piece I would add to it is also, again, when I look at, again, the mental health piece, I'm also in agreement with maybe we need mental health practitioners in those police offices, in those stations where police officers go. So that again, when there is a shooting, I realize that there is a process, everybody has to receive some type of assessment. But again, what happens if there are multiple situations where that person needs to be, again, looked at, examined or watched for an extended period of time? That's not what's happening. Because once the officer says, I'm okay, it's kind of like, you know, push aside and everything moves forward. So we need to make sure that we're looking at the mental health piece. We need to make sure that, and again, I will say, mental health assessment, annual psychological, is not going to tell me if you're racist, but it will tell me if you have a decline in your mental capacity as far as decision making and things of that nature. And that's very important as to how we can address this issue of criminal justice reform.
Yeah, I like the fact that sound like you got a pretty well thought out, you know, position regarding, you know, dealing with criminal justice reform and some of those issues, you know, you mentioned regarding liability, insurance, and I, you know, and those things, as you are aware, they're going to be quite some pretty big sticking points in negotiation, because you're going to be negotiating with the Police Benevolent Association and those organizations who are you know, who are dues paying organizations for policemen who are probably providing some kind of a benefits of insurance and stuff. So they'll probably push back. But just like you said, like with good conversation and communication over time, you can chip away and get some of those things done. But now I wanted to ask you, and you know, before we get too far down the road, we're dealing with a global pandemic currently, and we're experiencing things that we've never experienced before. And the next person who represents House District 117, they're going to be representing that district during a time when, you know, as a nation, frankly, as a world, we'll be coming out of and trying to decide on what the other side of COVID-19 is going to look like, you know, when we're coming out of it. You know, what do you think your role is going to be with that, and how you see, with your background and experience, you know, being a plus for this district, as this district, like the rest of the world, goes to that other side of COVID-19?
Well, I think right now what we need to be looking at is, again, I'm always about changing models, because the current models that we have are archaic. They're old, they're ancient and antiquated. What I would like to see, as we always providing, or there are different programs that incentivize businesses to do certain things, I think now we're in a perfect place where we can have the government at the state and federal levels begin to incentivize more remote employment opportunities for various employees. Again, it helps to minimize or reduce traffic. It helps to minimize, reduce pollution. It minimizes and reduces car accidents and other things of that nature. But it also provides, again, gainful employment opportunities for all of those who may have those different skills, but may not have transportation. See, some people, especially in South Dade, because we're a larger body when we go south of Flagler, piece of property, than when we go north of Flagler, which is much more congested and actually less. So I think if in our area, if we're able to create a lot more remote jobs where people can work from home, where people can, where people can work from home, where people can also avoid going out and taking that hour. For example, it used to take me, when I worked in Liberty City, it was an hour and a half for me to get to work in the morning.
Wow.
So it was an hour and a half for me to come home as well. So that's 3 hours of my day that I ended up spending, you know, just traveling alone, which again, you're trapped not just with me, but all the other cars that are on the road. So I think we need to look at incentivizing businesses to create those remote job opportunities because it'll benefit the environment. It'll also create less stress and also provides opportunities for those who don't have the transportation and are unable to get to certain segments of the county where the higher paying jobs are. So that would be one of my solutions as far as approaching that particular aspect in COVID-19. Not only that, but it does help us remain distant, the majority of the people that are participating, to be distant from others, which would also help minimize the spread of this particular contagion.
Okay, on that same note, you was talking about jobs and kind of like a paradigm shift, if you will, in terms of the jobs that are going to be available post COVID-19. And what you made me think about is another piece of criminal justice reform, and that is the fact that I would gamble to say maybe 85% of the or more of the folks that go into our prisons, they're coming back home. You know, they're coming back to the community, and you know, well, do you have any ideas as a member of the legislature on some things that you want to focus on with respect to reentry and making sure that these individuals can participate fully in society, and find some ways to keep families that are intact, you know, afterwards?
Again, we're giving businesses incentives to do a lot of things, so why can't that be one of those incentives? Again, I know there were programs years ago, and I'm not sure exactly how many are still in existence because I know some of them are being phased out, but they had business opportunities like the Wagner-Pfizer Act, where they were actually paying businesses to help retrain and help individuals that were reentering in society become gainfully employed. And through those opportunities, I think, yes, we can definitely keep those families intact, provide opportunities so that those individuals don't go back into the same behaviors that caused them to get arrested initially. And a lot of times it's out of need, desperation, where some people are committing crimes, not that they want to be a criminal, but if I need to eat, I need to eat, you know, and I don't have the skill set. So we got to, again, going back to the floor of our initial conversation, education is going to be our foundation. Once we get them educated, we find out, first of all, what track that they would like to go to. If it's a vocational track, let's help them get there. If it's a higher education track, let's help them get there. But wherever they want to go, wherever they envision themselves. But more importantly for me is, I would say, why are we waiting until they get out? Let's re-educate them while they're incarcerated. They're a captive audience. We can take advantage of that opportunity because, again, and incentivize that, hey, listen, you complete your studies in X amount of time, then we will shorten your days on the back end because you're doing, you know, work and trying to better yourselves. And I think if we incentivize, again, individuals as well as we do the businesses, we will find our society as a whole changing and becoming better.
I promise you this is not a trick question, okay? But that issue of dealing with reentry and helping those individuals behind the wall. When I say behind the wall, I'm talking while they're still there, and they may have a year left or what have you. You know, obviously that's not been done to any significant degree now. And there's probably some politics behind, you know, why that is. You know, how would you, as a state legislator, deal with those issues and engaging the Department of Corrections? You know, how would you try to change that in the system? You know.
Right. Well, again, you meet things at the top. You know, the director, who's the person that's over corrections. Let's start there, and inquire as to why it's not allowed or why it's not there. And then again, once we start with the top, we then say, hey, listen, we're going to go to different facilities to find out who needs what, who wants what. Because again, I can say I'm going to provide you with an education, but if I'm coming in with what I think you should have versus what you have a strong desire to pursue, I'm not being really fair with you and not allowing you to get into an area that's going to be more motivating for you. Because if I help you get to where you want to go, for example, I may come into a facility and say, hey, listen, who wants to learn how to be a DJ? Who wants to learn how to be a music producer? And you don't, not everybody's going to sign up, but if I'm giving you something that you are motivated to do, you're more inclined to, when you get out, focus on that craft once you get the skills in place and go in that particular direction. Now, some of them may want to be, various type of skills, i.e. the carpenter, the barber, the whomever. Because again, those are valuable trades. They are, and if you do them the right way, you can make some very good money.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is, one, let's assess those who are there so that we can find out what their desire is. Where do you want to be? Challenge them to think about, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And help them set up that life's plan, life's goals and plan, so that they can, again, pursue that which they desire and achieve it with our support.
Okay,
we
thank
can
you.
wrap our arms around.
Thank you. Now, there's something I want to ask you about. Many communities in South Dade are in flood zones, and some residents like the ability to carry flood insurance. What are your plans to tackle that issue of rising cost of flood insurance premiums in South Dade?
Well, that's going to take working with the Banking and Insurance Committee to address these issues. We need to find out, and there needs to be shown justification for these increases. If you can't show justification for an increase, then I don't understand how the legislator would allow it to happen unless they're being compensated by you. So I think one of the first steps is getting with the Banking and Insurance Committee members, if I'm not a part of that committee, and working with them to find out, hey, what's the justifications for this particular community going up, for example, 25%, and then this one over here going up 40%, while this one over here didn't even go up at all, or this one went up 5%. So we have to, again, ask the questions, challenge the individuals, and make them justify. And if we need to litigate to protect the people, then guess what? We lead the charge, we bring in the parties, and then they have to now justify to a judge why they feel inclined to, again, increase those rates. Now, I do know that there is some legislation that allows them discretion, and I think that's where the problem lies.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you can justify why there is a need for increase, then we should not allow it. Because again, we have not had as many devastating storms in recent years compared to previous years where we had storms that totally wiped out communities. So yes, we had trees fall. Yes, we had some lines down, a few tiles come off, but we never had, quote unquote, another Hurricane Andrew hit South Florida and experience the devastation that was there. So I think it's imperative that we make sure those that are in those committees challenge these industries when they come in to say, hey, we need to raise the insurance. Because again, if there isn't a reason other than their executives getting a pay raise, then we need to hold them to the carpet. And if I'm willing to do it.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's going to be, I'm going to ask just a few more questions and then we'll wrap it up. On the ballot on the ballot in November, not for your August 18th ballot, but on the ballot for November, there's going to be the issue of the Fight for 15. Now I'm going to assume that make an assumption that you're going to support that. Do you have any qualms about it at all?
Fight for 15?
Mm-hmm. $15 an hour.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, I have no qualms with that at all. I have no qualms whatsoever. Matter of fact, I think I said earlier, inmates, if they're working right now, inmates in the state of Florida get paid from $0 to less than $1 per hour. So I think inmates should get $15 an hour. Mm-hmm. So big business will think about, okay, well, would I rather have an inmate doing it? Or would I rather hire a person and give them a living wage so that they can take care of their family? Mm-hmm. So with me, I'm definitely for a $15 per hour wage increase without hesitation.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're in this race, and the vote is kind of around the corner. We're about 2 weeks away, right? And you got two other candidates in this race that you're running against. And you know, all of y'all are obviously different. You bring different things, you know, to the table. If you can speak to voters right now, who is kind of pondering who they should vote for and why they should pull the lever for Harold Ford to punch 65. You know, what would you tell them that differentiates yourself from those others that make you the better candidate?
Well, again, I would say let's look at my education, let's look at my background, but more importantly, let's look at what type of representative that I would be in our community. I'm a representative, or would be a representative, who would be about solely empowerment. I'm here to empower our community. I am here to empower our individuals and families so that as we move forward, and bring those things to pass that we talked about, helping them start their own jobs, helping those that have small businesses build capacity, helping them grow their businesses. And then if they need to connect with larger industries, being that person that can be a conduit to help them get to where they want to go aspirationally. So when you're looking for a leader who's trying to build not just his community, but build the individuals of the community, then I'm your man. It's just that simple. If you're looking, you know, for opportunities where someone's going to come in not just with the same solutions, again, like I said earlier, we can't solve 21st century problems with 20th century solutions. And that's what we've been doing. If you look at even our legislature, let's look at our federal legislature. Some of those individuals have been there 20, 30, and 40 years, pushing the same type of legislation over and over and over again, just because it benefits them and not benefiting us, the people of the United States, the people within this democracy. So what I plan to bring to the table as it relates to represent the community is someone who's going to come up with innovative solutions for the overall benefit of not just the individual, because once I know that individual is empowered and benefits, our community is going to be also empowered and benefit as well. So that's what I have to offer the people, and I would encourage them to punch 65 at their leisure.
Okay, and I'm going to end by just number one saying thank you, you know, for taking the time, and I thank you for running for office. I think that most people go through their entire lives and we complain about, you know, things that are happening in the world. We usually do it from the comfort of our homes, you know, sitting in our comfortable chairs, never, you know, doing what you're doing, which is a brave thing. Put your name out there on the ballot and to go out there and try to get people to vote for you and knowing that there's going to be slings and arrows going your way. You know, and I really appreciate you, you know, taking time to, you know, to chat with me today. And I just want to end by asking you just one other little question. I just want to ask you, tell us something that people wouldn't ordinarily know about Harold Ford.
That's interesting. Well, growing up, I played with the Palmetto Raiders Optimist Club when I was playing Little League football. But again, that experience helped me when I, again, went to Miami Southridge to play for the Spartans. And we actually played the state championship game here in Miami-Dade County at Tamiami Stadium, which most people don't know and don't recall because it's one of those smaller stadiums that didn't get a lot of fanfare. And it's, you know, but we played there. It was a very enjoyable experience. But not only that, when I went to the University of Florida, no one told me that I was too small to play football. So when I walked onto the University of Florida football team, it was an eye-opening experience. I will say that because those dudes were a lot bigger, stronger, and faster. But guess what? Until I suffered a neck injury, I continued to do the best I could. And it was a very, again, rewarding experience, a fun experience. And I cherish those moments at the University of Florida. So with that said, hey, this is who I am. That's part of my history that a lot of people don't know, that I was a walk-on with the University of Florida. I had a chance to meet with Galen Hall and some of those other individuals who are in the NFL, now retired from the NFL. But again, it was a very fun experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I look forward to doing what I can to help this community become the beacon of hope, life, and strength for everyone that lives in it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Harold. And we'll end and we'll be passing this around and again, thank you so much. You have a wonderful evening.
Hey, you be blessed. Thank you all. Thanks everybody for coming, and look forward to talking to you soon. God
Okay.
bless.
All right. God bless you too.
Michael,
Yes.
I said, don't leave a minute. I got a text from Dorothy Jackson.
Uh-huh.
She said she could not get on. But like I said, I looked to